Let's go back over 1400 years ago. In Arabia, for example, 1400 years ago, when a person had an infant girl, that was like, she's going to bring us a bad name, and their faces would blacken and they'll be just moved and go, oh my God, what have we got here? And to the extent that, as we read in the Qur'an, girls were buried alive. Imagine your young girl, an infant, being buried alive purely, her only crime is that she's a female. When Islam came, Islam totally abolished this and would have no part in this whatsoever. And so Islam gave rights to a woman, unlike ever before. And so Islam has given rights and has honored a woman. And hence, honoring her by regulating the way she should dress. God has given a woman beauty. And that beauty in Islam should be curtailed or curbed, should be controlled. So that it doesn't lead to a fitna, it doesn't lead to any sort of, promiscuity. Islam says women are not to be used as advertising material, to promote, to market a product. I mean, if you look at the television, when they want to market any sort of product, they use a woman. That is just not on in Islam. Women are more honorable than that. So, and they have been given, beauty, and Islam has regulated that. Hence, the hijab. And the hijab really is covering her hair, which really, when a woman's hair is out, that is really displaying her ultimate beauty. But when that's covered, the beauty is still there, but not so apparent. And this isn't something exclusive to Muslims. Let's go back to Christians, to Christianity. And let's actually go back and see what pictures, when people are drawing Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ, Isa alayhi salam, what do they portray? Do they portray a woman with her hair out? They put a woman who is wearing the hijab. And nuns are wearing hijab. So why are people not talking ill about nuns, yet they're talking ill, unfortunately, some people, about Muslim women being oppressed? Why don't you say that nuns are being oppressed? A Muslim woman is actually liberated when she's wearing her hijab, because she doesn't have to go out and, please everybody and make sure that she has this look and everyone is looking at her. That's not liberating. But when a woman can dress modestly and not have to worry about people looking at her as a sex object, and that's what they're doing. They're promoting so many things through women. So a woman is not oppressed in Islam.
What are some of the other rights that Islam gave to women? I mean, I'm thinking of things like, rights to property, rights to wealth, rights to education, participation. These are all things granted at the time when women had no rights at all in other parts of the world.
A woman's property in Islam is her property. She may do whatever she wishes to do with her property. Of course, within the boundaries, not to be excessive in any which way, not to be extravagant spending, and her money is her money. But whereas, for example, we have a husband and wife situation, a husband's money is not only his money, it's also his wife's money. He has to spend on her. He needs to ensure that he is spending on her, he is providing food and drink and clothing and shelter. That's the responsibility of the husband. Now let's say that both of the husband and wife are working in the house. Well, the wife is not required to pay for the rent. The woman is not required to do that in Islam. It's really, the onus is on the husband. So really her wealth is her wealth. And her husband has no right to that wealth unless she, from her own accord and free will, gives that or contributes towards the household. That's in terms of the wealth.
In the words of a wise imam, I seem to remember, her money is hers and your money is hers. I believe.
That's right. That's right. What's hers is hers and what's yours is hers, And that's
oppressive how, exactly?
So how is that oppressive? You know, so really we've seen that Islam has given rights. Islam has protected the woman, has safeguarded her. I mean, hijab really is like, we view a woman as something which is precious. And we all know that something which is precious is always what? Is covered, is preserved, is, you know, treated in different ways we treat other things. And unfortunately we have a lot of people out there, you know, that have, you know, sinister motives and look at women as a sex object. So we say no, I mean, you know, her beauty is confined to her husband and to her immediate, you know, family, you know, members.
This is one of the sad things I think about the society we live in, that any woman in this whole society can dress modestly, raises not a single comment. A Muslim woman chooses to dress modestly, suddenly it's a news item. How can this possibly be? I know it's down to things as ignorance, and there might be political means or whatever, but this is just it. I mean, how is it that, you know, I remember living in England, and a Nigerian woman can walk down the street in a full flowing robe and a traditional headdress. She's as covered in a Muslim woman. No one bats an eyelid. Walking behind her is perhaps a sister from the Middle East who's wearing, you know, maybe a suit, but she has a headscarf on, and people feel the need to stare at her and point at her. It's like, what's even the difference? And like you said, maybe a Catholic nun walking the other way, people will be kind and respectful. They're not going to give this lady a hard time. So what is it, do you think, that about hijab that seems to inflame people?
Well, this happens in areas where they may be not exposed to so many Muslims. Then they would find it foreign through their, you know, ignorance. And that's maybe just a natural reaction. But where the problem is when they take it further and they start to label or abuse or, you know, say derogatory things about an individual who is just another human being practicing what they believe is right, you know, and this is really all it is. And today we find Muslim women wearing hijab in the shopping centres who work there. We find Muslim women wearing hijab as you know, in the airports. We find them everywhere, in schools, even news broadcasters. So it shouldn't be something which is foreign. And I think with technology today, the more exposure that people are having towards women with hijab, the more tolerant and more understanding they're becoming. And that's what it is. We need to be raising more of an awareness, and there needs to be more of educating our children in the schools, so that these Muslims, this is what they believe, just like Christian nuns wear that, Muslim women wear this, and maybe some of the objectives and what Islam is out to achieve. Remembering, one of those is to preserve the honor of a woman as much as possible. And so a woman who is wearing hijab is saying, there's no room for extramarital relationship. The word hijab is a screen, is a veil. Okay, so that's what linguistically what it means. Now you'll find there's always a connection between, as you've probably been hearing, between the linguistic definition and the contextual definition, or the Sharia definition. And the hijab, generally, when you hear hijab, this is, you know, covering the entire body except for the face and the hands. When I say hands, up to the wrists. This is something that the woman can show from her body. There is another form of dress which is known as niqab. And niqab is a form of hijab, because there is an addition now to the hijab, in that it covers the face except for a space between the eyes. So you see some women, they are covering also their face, but there's a little maybe hole or holes or one big hole that's for the eyes to see through. They call this niqab. And you see this much in Saudi Arabia, or in other, maybe Kuwait, in other Arab countries. And more so we're seeing it also in Western countries. We also have the parda, or the, what do they call it, the burqa, which is covering the whole face. This is also hijab, because it's a screen, but it's an addition. So the way in which it's worn is where the name is. So if your face is uncovered, you're wearing hijab. If your face is covered with a hole, you're wearing niqab. And if your face is covered completely, you're wearing the burqa or the parda. So this is all just linguistics and semantics, I guess, one being a bit more than the other. And each have their proofs and evidences from an Islamic perspective.
And so whichever form the sister chooses, it's her choice.
Remembering, in Islam, there's a verse that says, "La ikraha fi din," that there is no compulsion in religion. You're not compelled to do anything. You have as we spoke about before, that you do have a free will. You have the choice to do something and not do something. But the ramifications of not doing something that you're supposed to be doing, then if those are unfavorable, then you have nobody but to blame for yourself.
And let's make it clear, Islam has a dress code for men as well.
Oh yes. Yes, there is a hijab for the males. If we want to call it a hijab, a male as well is not allowed to, must cover at least between the navel and between the knees. And it must be loose. Just like with the clothing of a woman wearing hijab, it must be loose. It must not be transparent. It must cover all of her body. In many cases, with the exception of the hands and the face. And it must not be a clothing that is specific to a certain religion other than Islam, So this is generally the conditions. And likewise, the male should wear clothing which is not tight, especially on the private parts, that covers between the navel and the knees. He must also, when praying, ensure that he's wearing something to cover his shoulders. Many scholars of Islam have mandated, I believe it's obligatory for a male to have the beard. That's why a lot of Muslims have a beard. And many of them have it almost like this length that I have now, or a little bit longer, being the fist. And that anything beyond that you can trim. Other scholars have said no in Islam, that it's not obligatory for a male to have a beard, but it's only something which is desirable. And again, this is a scholarly debate. This is from amongst the things that a Muslim male should also observe.